Quería que Jordan Peterson explicara sus pensamientos acerca de la libertad de expresión y por qué es necesario que ésta se restrinja. Jordan Peterson le explicó sus pensamientos y lo verás en este video. Mientras ves el video, comenta qué es lo que opinas. Es muy importante saberlo. Asimismo, Jordan Peterson nos expresa que sí es necesario que se restrinja hasta cierto punto la libertad de expresión. Mira el video completo y entenderás el porqué. Pero antes, si este tipo de contenido te gusta, suscríbete a nuestro canal. Tenemos la meta a mediano plazo de llegar a los 100,000 suscriptores. Sin mayor dilación, empecemos.
I just want to first thank your comments on things like political correctness and the obsession of certain elements of the left on campuses to screen out discourse, because I genuinely think that is an issue and problem in status quo. But following on from that, I just want to pick your thoughts on what you say about freedom of speech and discussions in general, right? Because you basically flagged that, I think, in your answers just then, that freedom of speech has an instrumental purpose. It's there to help us find truth, correct me if I'm wrong, to identify the correctness or the logos against the possible consequence of blood and death. So here's the question, right? If I, as an individual, am affected by discourse in a way that doesn't cause physical violence, so that's not banned by hate speech laws and whatnot, but makes me feel so deeply uncomfortable that I don't belong to society or this community, or when I say something, whenever I try to say something, I'm ridiculed because of my race, the way I talk, or my gender, or the way I behave, then surely that means that my valuable insight to contribute towards logos, towards the pursuit of truth, is shut out by other people's more vociferous speech and more dominant speech. And this is what we see in cases of campuses, whether it be from the right or the left, of people using very violent and loud language to drown out dissent, to drown out those who oppose them on campuses, in society and whatnot. From Donald Trump to people in Swarthmore, we've seen this happen. So wouldn't you say that the attempt to claw back or the right of freedom of speech isn't so far absolute as instrumental? And based on that, therefore, there are some cases where freedom of speech of some individuals can be curtailed if we want to get the better appreciation of the logos and a better inclusion of more voices that are currently being shut out as a result of the extremity and radicalism of those select few. Wouldn't you say that's the case? Thank you.
Well, there's a very simple answer to that, which is yes, but I'll elaborate. I mean, the first thing is, I'm not an admirer of hate speech laws. But that doesn't mean that I'm naive enough to think that there's no such thing as hate speech. So obviously, if you've ever been involved in an extremely serious argument, you know perfectly well that there's such a thing as hate speech, because you've probably uttered some. So, and there's also no doubt that there are forms of speech that are utterly reprehensible, and some of those are actually already punished by law. You can't incite to violence, you can't libel someone, right? So we have some restrictions already on what's acceptable discourse. Whether it's the case, typically speaking, that some people have more privileged access to free speech than others, well, that's obviously the case. I mean, that's part of power. And power is one of the means by which people climb hierarchies, although the more you can climb a hierarchy by exercising power, the more that's an indication of the fact that that hierarchy has become corrupt. So there's no doubt that these structural impediments to the free exchange of discourse exist. There's also no doubt, as you already laid out, that that's not in everyone's best interest, because what you want, if you have any sense in your society, and this is also why I think that we've put proper emphasis on the sovereignty of the individual, is that you want everyone's logos to have the opportunity to clarify the unknown and reconstitute the world. And if you shut that down, then you risk getting access to the unique insights that that individual might bring. Okay, so I agree with your diagnosis completely. And I think that, even in the West, to ignore the fact that many of our hierarchies tilt towards tyranny and that prejudice still exists in multiple forms is a mistake, although it's only one factor among many and shouldn't be identified as the primary causal determinant of each individual's life. I think that's a dreadful error. The question is, what do you do about it? And the devil's in the details. And as I said already, I'm not an admirer, for example, of hate speech laws, even though there's plenty of hateful speech, because I think the best thing to do is to leave free speech alone as much as you possibly can. not because that will result in the perfect conditions for free speech, but because anything else that you're likely to do is going to make it worse rather than better. And so that's how it looks to me.
Can I just follow
Very quickly.
So, just want to pick your brains on hate speech laws, because it seems that you agree that the pursuit of logos and logic and some sort of achievement of individualization, individual autonomy that is the end goal of discussion here, right? So let's assume, like, correct me if I'm wrong again, that's the end objective. Here's the thing, it seems
No,
like...
I wouldn't say that exactly. I wouldn't say that exactly. I think that's too individualistic. I would say that what you want is two things happening simultaneously, is that you want to maximize individual development, but you want to do that in a way that brings the greatest amount of harmony simultaneously possible to the familial unit and also to the broader social unit. So those interests have to be stacked. It's like what's best for you, but that's also in a manner that's best for your family and for your community. So it's not purely individual.
So on that basis of achieving communal harmony and individual freedom at the same time, wouldn't you say that there's certain forms of free speech or hate speech that are so vehement and so de-dignifying that it disrupts both local harmony within communities, but also makes individuals feel as if they can't really engage in retaliatory, clarificatory discourse against them because they fear the potential repercussions, even if it doesn't lead to violence. They just fear it so much that it might irrationally or rationally even drive them to not speak.
Happens all the time. In fact, it's the standard situation. If you look across the world, most societies don't do a good job of either promoting or allowing free speech. I don't know how we ever managed it. It's so unlikely because it's so hard on people and hard on those who occupy positions of power in tyrannical hierarchies that I can't believe that any society's ever managed to figure it out at all. So those dangers are always there.
La libertad de expresión es como el tejido que une los hilos de la sociedad, permitiendo que florezcan las opiniones individuales y se fortalezcan los lazos sociales. Es un derecho fundamental que empodera a cada persona para que exprese sus pensamientos, creencias y sentimientos sin temor a la represión, nutriendo así su identidad y autonomía. En este vasto océano de ideas, la libertad de expresión actúa como un faro que guía a las personas hacia la información diversa, permitiéndoles formar opiniones informadas y participar activamente en los asuntos que les conciernen. Este intercambio de ideas crea un mosaico de perspectivas, donde se celebra la diversidad y se fomenta la tolerancia. Sin embargo, en este viaje hacia la libertad de expresión, nos encontramos con el desafío de definir qué constituye exactamente el discurso de odio. Es como navegar en aguas turbulentas, donde los límites entre la crítica legítima y la incitación al odio pueden ser borrosos. Lo que puede considerarse como una expresión polémica en un contexto puede ser percibido como discurso de odio en otro, lo que complica la tarea de establecer criterios claros y universales. Esta ambigüedad nos lleva al peligro de la censura excesiva, donde la libertad de expresión legítima puede ser sofocada en el nombre de combatir el odio. Nos enfrentamos al riesgo de que las decisiones sobre qué es o no es discurso de odio estén sujetas a sesgos y agendas políticas, lo que podría conducir a una interpretación arbitraria y a la discriminación contra ciertos grupos o puntos de vista. Por tanto, en este viaje hacia la protección de la libertad de expresión y la lucha contra el discurso de odio, debemos navegar con cautela, manteniendo la transparencia, la imparcialidad y el respeto por la diversidad de opiniones. Solo así podremos preservar la esencia misma de la democracia y garantizar que cada voz, por controvertida que sea o políticamente incorrecta, tenga la oportunidad de ser escuchada y debatida en el tejido de nuestra sociedad. Es fundamental que cualquier proceso de regulación del discurso discurso de odio sea transparente y accesible para todos los involucrados. Esto implica que las leyes, políticas y procedimientos relacionados con la censura del discurso de odio sean claros y fácilmente comprensibles. La transparencia también requiere que las decisiones tomadas por las autoridades encargadas de regular el discurso de odio sean justificadas y basadas en criterios objetivos y públicamente disponibles. Además, se debe garantizar que haya mecanismos efectivos de apelación y supervisión para corregir posibles errores o abusos en el proceso de censura, tal como ocurre en la actualidad. La regulación del discurso de odio debe aplicarse de manera imparcial, sin discriminación ni favoritismo hacia ningún grupo, individuo o punto de vista. Esto significa que las leyes y políticas deben ser formuladas y aplicadas de manera neutral, sin sesgos políticos, ideológicos o culturales. Además, quienes estén a cargo de regular el discurso de odio deben actuar de manera imparcial y objetiva, evitando cualquier influencia indebida en sus decisiones. La imparcialidad también implica que se debe considerar el contexto específico en el que se realiza el supuesto discurso de odio, así como la intención y el impacto de las declaraciones en cuestión antes de tomar medidas de censura. La protección de la libertad de expresión requiere respetar y valorar la diversidad de opiniones, incluso aquellas que pueden ser controversiales o impopulares. Esto implica reconocer que las sociedades democráticas están compuestas por una amplia gama de opiniones y perspectivas, y que todas tienen derecho a ser escuchadas y consideradas en el debate público. Al regular el discurso de odio, es importante no limitar indebidamente la expresión de opiniones legítimas y respetar el principio de pluralismo, siempre y cuando no se incite al odio o se promueva la discriminación. ¿Y tú qué opinas? Déjamelo saber en los comentarios. Si este video te gustó, agradecería mucho tu like, que comentaras el video y que lo compartas. Gracias, hasta luego.